Some of you said you wouldn't run away if I actually talked about Chinese philosophy. So, fine. Let's go hardcore this time. If nobody watches this one, I'm never going this deep again. So who the hell were the Mohists? Because if you only know them from Where Winds Meet, you might think they were basically a bunch of ancient Chinese inventors living in the mountains, building mechanical birds, puppets, giant machines, and apparently a flying city. That's not completely wrong. But it's kind of like describing Batman as a rich guy with a car. Technically true. You missed the important part. The Mohists were one of the strangest and most fascinating groups in ancient China. Think part monk, part engineer, part special forces. They wore simple clothes, lived extremely frugal lives, hated luxury and unnecessary ceremony, and expected insane levels of discipline from themselves. But at the same time, these guys were obsessed with science and engineering. They studied mathematics, mechanics, optics, and logic. The Mohist texts even contain an early description of the camera obscura, basically the principle behind a pinhole camera. So when Where Winds Meet gives them complicated mechanisms and machines, that's not the devs randomly putting technology into Wuxia. That part actually makes sense. And then there's the part I really wish the game had focused on more. These guys were monsters at defending cities. One of their core ideas was Fei Gong. Fei Gong. You'll sometimes see that translated as something like against war. That's misleading. Mohists weren't pacifists who thought nobody should ever fight. They opposed wars of aggression. If a powerful state wanted to invade a weaker one and ordinary people were going to suffer, the Mohists could literally go help the weaker side defend its city. And they were very good at it. They studied siege warfare, fortifications, defensive machinery, engineering, and countermeasures. There's a famous story about Mozi hearing that the state of Chu was preparing to attack Song with a new siege weapon. He traveled to Chu and basically ran a simulated siege against the engineer who designed it. The engineer tried one method. Mozi countered it. Another method. Mozi countered that too. Again. Until the attack basically became pointless. So, when you see Mohists surrounded by mechanisms, complicated machines, and defensive technology in Where Winds Meet, that's not steampunk. That's probably one of the easiest parts of Hidden Mountain to justify historically. Mechanical birds. Ancient texts do associate Mozi with stories of wooden flying devices, although obviously that's legendary material, not archaeological evidence of ancient aircraft. Mechanical humans? Like I explained in the last video, that idea appears in another ancient Chinese story about Yanxi. So no, the problem isn't, why does ancient China suddenly have machines? The much more interesting question is, does this actually feel like the Mohists? And that's where a lot of Chinese players start going, not really. Because engineering was only the outside. The philosophy underneath it was much crazier. Their most famous idea was G&I, impartial care. Basically, you shouldn't only care about your family, your people, or your state. Other people's lives matter too. And they took this really seriously. Imagine someone telling you, you should care about another person's father the way you care about your own. Most normal humans would probably say, that's not how humans work. The Mohists basically said, too bad, try harder. Their engineering wasn't just, look at this cool machine I built. Technology was supposed to be useful, save resources, protect people, stop suffering, defend the weak against aggression, which is also why their lifestyle was so extreme. Fancy music? Wasteful. Huge funerals? Wasteful. Expensive ceremonies? Wasteful. Luxury? Also wasteful. They looked at ancient aristocratic society and went, why are you spending all this money on useless stuff when ordinary people are suffering? These were some of ancient China's most rational thinkers. Logic, geometry, optics, engineering. But they weren't just philosophers sitting around writing books. They had an actual organization, a leader called the Juzi. Strict discipline, rules. People willing to travel across states and put themselves in danger for what they believed. Monks plus engineers plus special forces. A group of extremely disciplined, technically brilliant people saying love everyone, oppose aggression, live simply, build useful things, go physically defend people who need help. And somehow, they were almost too idealistic to survive the real world. The game got a lot of the visual vocabulary right. Mechanisms, engineering, mechanical creatures, machines everywhere. Sure, that isn't steampunk randomly invading Wuxia. But later, When the Mohist leader is basically controlling thousands of machines by himself to defend everyone, your entire school was historically famous for organized city defense. Why does one guy know how to do this? Where did your entire tradition go? That's the difference. If you just play Hidden Mountain as a fantasy story, a lot of it is cool. Some individual stories are genuinely touching, but if you already know what the Mohists represented historically, well, the first 2 fragmented chapters you guys have seen so far, honestly, they're fine. They actually feel very Mohist. It almost feels like a completely different team wrote them. But the main story later on, well, CN players have a nickname for it. The Mohist Mental Asylum. Once you meet everyone, you'll understand why.